So welcome to our meeting this afternoon. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So welcome to yet another Persia webinar. My name is Tahir Danish. It is my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon. Our webinar this afternoon, as you know, focuses on the interrelationships between history, the process of democracy, and the emerging area of AI. We are blessed to have three fantastic presenters this afternoon. First, we have Professor Ali Ansari, who is a well-known face in the Persian diaspora and in the Iranian community. He is a professor of modern history at University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He's also the founding director of the Institute for Iranian Studies. We also have Afshin Molavi with us, who's an Iranian-American author, a co-director of the Emerge 85 Lab, and a senior research fellow at the New American Foundation. He is involved with a number of other prestigious organizations, and he's a senior advisor at Oxford Analytica. Both these outstanding figures will be discussants for a presentation by Soushiant Zanganehpour, who's a winner of the Global Challenge Prize 2017. He is the founder of Sway, which is an AI entity that defines a new model for global governance through bottom-up and inclusive decision-making processes. Without taking any more of your time, I encourage everyone to read more about our speakers and ask that you please remain on mute at all times if possible. And also, if you wish to move around, please turn your videos off to ensure that the quality of the program remains intact for everyone who's viewing the webinar live. Without taking any more time, I wish to now welcome Soushiant John to please begin his presentation about Sway and the process that he's been through in creating this fantastic phenomenon.
Thank you, Tahir John, for having me, for coordinating this webinar, and generally the hard work you're doing on having these conversations. They're really important for our development as a diaspora and sharing knowledge with one another. So I'm really grateful, and I'm super grateful to, in a very small way, share the stage with such important other members of our diaspora. Afshin and Dr. Ansari are people I looked up to growing up, doing research on Iran and other political areas. So huge honor to be here. So I'm going to share my screen, and I understand that there's going to be time for questions at the end. So please direct them to Tahir or the kind of chat function, and we will kind of address them at the appropriate time. I have about hopefully 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of a presentation to just set up the context of, then invite the others to kind of attack this idea I have, and I'll obviously welcome constructive feedback from others as well. So here we are. I'm going to just set this up. So there we go. All right, so taking Iran out of it for a second, we're really looking at the evolution of democracy and how it might permeate into different existing forms of government. Before I jump in, let me just tell you a little bit about Sway, about the company I built over the past few years, and then we can sort of understand where it all fits in to the evolution of democracy and an alternative form of it. The Sway is a bottom-up idea management and decision-making platform powered by some artificial intelligence. And that the reason we set up the company is, organizations face a number of new challenges on a daily basis, whether they're pandemics or dealing with social and demographic and technological changes. And the best research out there tells us that people and their people are the number one source for finding solutions to these problems. But because organizations are the way they are, they have strict hierarchies, really closed cultures, often very resistant leaders, it prevents ideas from surfacing very efficiently. It feels like they go through a maze. And most people that want to contribute feel like this. They feel dismissed by decision makers or leaders. And the consequence is twofold. One is that will to participate turns into a lot of disengagement and lost productivity for an organization. People that experience what I'm talking you through are 3 times more likely to leave their jobs within a year, almost three times more likely to withhold good ideas, market-ready ideas, and about 34% less productive than those that don't experience this. It's a pretty large loss of value. And what this means for an organization is that they lose out on human capital and they lose out on innovation potential. What we are trying to do with our platform is to help organizations, crowdsource investable and decision-ready ideas from their people, from a bottom-up process, a merit-based process. And the other things I kind of want to emphasize here is that there are 2 core missions that we have as a company that resonates in all of our work. The first is to radically increase inclusion and access to the decision-making process. And the second is to source investable ideas through the process of collaboration. It's not just about giving people a voice, but turning that voice into something useful. Maybe I'll spare the how it works process. Maybe we'll come back to this, but just kind of high level, we launched the company in 2019, and we have implemented it with several organizations around the globe. Some major corporations like Etihad and Bosch, and in Canada, Life Labs all across the nation. We work with governmental entities like the government of Chile, government of Mexico, and most recently with the UN Secretary General's office to launch a global consultation on what the future of the UN could look like. We've had over 30,000 users of the platform, and we're still trying to find our footing in place. It's a very different concept, a different way of sourcing innovation or ideas. But let me just tell you a couple words about sort of where this came from, how I stumbled upon this obsession. It'll help you guys hopefully understand how it fits into what we're all experiencing with our various interfaces with democratic institutions. So the story is the following. I was a director of strategy and operations at a center in Oxford. And I had a £3 million budget that needed to be spent every year on various programs and investments and initiatives. And my job was to try to come up with what those were and present really strong cases for them. And this was me, and this was my director, the person I would report into. And I found that through the process of developing a set of options and investment decisions, oftentimes the decisions were already made from the top down and somewhere outside of Oxford. Our headquarters was in Palo Alto. The board of directors would fly in every year for this process, and it was more a ceremonial process. It wasn't really a deliberative bottom-up strategy process. The decisions were already made, and they'd sort of come to, bring us on board to them. I found this a very kind of disempowering experience. One, because the people on the front lines that were meant to implement these programs or these ideas had no real say in, alternatives to them. Two, all the learnings those people had had over the years or year of implementation couldn't be incorporated into the design of that solution. And so it left me with a really bad taste in my mouth. It felt like this. It felt like a very closed, inaccessible, extremely outdated process for coming up with alternatives to how we might spend a sizable amount of money. And what I kept thinking and thinking more about this issue of like, what is the root of this problem? How could it have been done differently? I realized that this was not necessarily a cultural problem or a problem of leadership. It was mostly a structural problem. This problem exists almost everywhere else. It's a consequence of how we organize our organizations. We have borrowed a lot of the models from the industrial era or the military industrial kind of era. We're very much interested in getting efficiency out of these processes and these organizations instead of optionality. And so, most organizations are structured like this. They have strict hierarchies and they exist through, or they create efficiency through representation. Now, you put these structures against the times that we're currently living in, and you see that, wow, there are a lot of problems that may be resulting from these structures that we need to really think carefully about. So the experience for me was like this aha moment that what I'm experiencing at a very, very small level, this inability to input effectively into a decision-making process, actually, I was sort of experiencing this also at a municipal level, at a city level, at a federal level, where I'm interacting with more democratic, larger organizations. It's a paradigm problem. And so I saw it everywhere, and the light bulb went off in my head, thinking, okay, this is a really big problem. Why don't I try to do something about it? So once I made that connection, I started working on a prototype of what I thought would be a different way of decision making, something more bottom up, merit-based, technology supported to help people write better and be more included. And somehow magically I put this idea forward to Tahir Jan explained that the Global Challenges Foundation. They launched a prize looking for new models for how our democratic institutions could function, how they could become more future compatible. And we ended up winning this prize, which was a $600,000 US grant. It helped us, actually take the prototype we had and build it with a team and take it to market. So much of the early traction we received was thanks to this grant. But a couple more minutes about these points, and then I'll hopefully pause and open up for questions, but or open up for alternative views. But so how does it fit in? How does Sway this bottom-up process for finding your next innovation idea fit into what we're experiencing at globally at our in our democracies? The reality is democracy everywhere today suffers from a crisis of confidence. Last year, the year before, Pew did a really excellent study of 27 countries all across the world, looking at people's perceptions of democracy. And 51% of people surveyed were quite resentful about how democracy is functioning and the outcomes that democracy was producing. This wasn't just a Western phenomenon. The 27 countries spanned all different forms of democracy, all different forms of society as well. So you sort of see a consistent experience, which tells me it's more a structural issue than it is a cultural or regional kind of issue. And the reality is, like, very much what I experience, people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis when they are interacting with their democratic institutions. Most citizens in democratic processes today feel like this when they're trying to have their voice heard. And that's because institutions are designed like this, where even if there are good ideas throughout society, getting them in front of those that matter isn't straightforward. It's very laborious, which is why ideas, whether they're good or bad, is not the question. It's that they end up dying and they lead to a tremendous amount of apathy, disengagement, and mistrust from the populace. If we look at some research over time, you sort of see that trust has been on a declining trajectory for years, from the 60s up until even during wonderful Trump's era. 2017 for me was a really milestone year, where Edelman does this trust barometer on a yearly basis, and they look at trust in the 4 major institutions of society, trying to understand where people have more faith and confidence. And for the first time in the history of this barometer, and they found that trust had declined below 50% in all 4 major institutions of society: business, media, government, and NGOs, where people didn't trust these organizations to be doing the right things. This one is for Professor Ansari, given the debacle of the vote leave situation in London. I mean, unchecked political dishonesty is a reality of our times, where there is no strong forms of accountability for being dishonest. It's very hard to keep people accountable and have strong consequences for that dishonesty. Leveraging some philosophers here, that just seems to be massive distrust in most things that are centralized. We don't really trust governments. We don't go to church or synagogues as much as we did before. We don't trust banks, and increasingly people don't trust tech companies either. You also, there's some couple of other stats to keep in mind. I'll give you the plus side of this shortly, but excellent study came out of Princeton several years ago, where they showed that the people actually had little to no voice in setting priorities in the policymaking process, that they had no influence, and in fact, citizens were systematically silenced through the way in which we've structured the functioning of democracy. Consequently, you see the rise of political protests everywhere. Street politics, as we call it. This was a great piece by The Economist that came out a year ago, showing the proliferation of this. And another horrible consequence is when young people are growing up in these times, they're starting to think less of the utility of democracy. They don't think it's as essential as it used to be. People have alternative views of what should happen. On the flip side of this, people like Andreessen Horowitz or Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, the founder of Netscape, coined this very famous phrase here that says software is eating the world, meaning software is replacing a lot of the physical things that we used to have and creating more access as a consequence. We have the rise of technology doing things we only dreamed of, from 3D printing of materials to people leveraging robotics for creating exoskeletons to help people that can't walk. CRISPR being used to gene edit impairments to our genetics, to drones delivering pizzas and hopefully medicine and other sorts of things. Like, technology is doing things that it's really catching up to our dreams. One important data point to mention here, to just kind of drive the point home, is in 2016, the amount of data produced from all the different devices that we have, from sensors and phones and other things, the data footprint of that was the equivalent of all the data we've ever produced from the beginning of of time until that point. Beginning of time meaning the beginning of recorded time where data was being collected. If you follow this trajectory, I mean, data is on an exponential growth curve. That amount of data is increasing, it's doubling every year, to the point where folks are estimating that in about 6 years from now, the doubling will happen every 12 hours. So if you're someone that's in a decision-making role where you've centralized that function, how will you keep up with the pace of change if everything needs to filter through, your body or your executive? It's going to be nearly impossible unless we have the support of other tools. This is the reality is this, and I'll sort of try to wrap up the presentation shortly after here, is that we live in a time when rockets are landing themselves and cars are driving themselves and money is managing itself at the same time that democracy is functioning in the way that it is. So we're really at the nexus of two different, trajectories or growth paths. Technology and society are moving at an exponential rate. Things are changing, accelerating, and our ways of finding solutions, including people, finding adaptations, has remained linear. And the consequence is that we have this enormous deficit, which is what I call the democratic trust deficit, or things that lead to democratic deconsolidation. These linear approaches don't match the accelerating times that we live in. And that's where we're trying to insert sway, is that we believe a bottom-up citizen-generated or people-generated solution based on metrics, leveraging the support of technology, can not only restore a lot of the lost legitimacy, but help us produce options that are currently not on the table. Same way that, if this was yesterday's model of just electing the next leader, we believe that, no, we need to move past this. We need to empower individuals to come together to find and create solutions that currently aren't on the table, leveraging the tools that we have. It's not just about electing smart people, it's about selecting better quality ideas and including people in that process. That's what we believe restores legitimacy and helps make the system work for users. That's what we believe will help reverse some of these really awful trends that we're seeing in the field of democracy. No affiliation or strong love for Obama, but I do appreciate his quote here that he made upon sort of his exit from office, like saying, we need to use all available technologies and methods to open up the federal government, creating a new level of transparency to change the way business is conducted, not just in Washington, but in every capital. Give Americans a chance to participate in deliberations and decision-making, not just electing someone to come there and represent them. Those times are done, in my opinion, and our children won't live in those times. We need to kind of progress past them. So 2, 3 last slides, and I promise I'll be quiet, but I really, take this analogy. I mean, forget Uber's social externalities and think of the concept that it introduced to a very stagnant industry. When this was written, it was written at a time when Uber was still under $100 billion company, but the point is clear. Like, it was a several billion-dollar lesson in building for how the world should work instead of optimizing for how the world does work. Adding an app to a stagnant taxi company without a reputation system and stuff just doesn't work. We need to think of things from a different perspective. We need to redesign from the bottom up. And that's what Sway is really trying to do. It's a modern decision-making process for how the decision-making and policy creation process should work from the bottom up. We're trying to rebuild it to make this a replaceable function. Upskill all of these people in the process of decision-making, give them the tools to increase their autonomy and their accountability, and help them find solutions that currently aren't there. I'll sort of pause here. I have a ton of slides, as you can hopefully see, that maybe I can reference in any questions and other things. But yeah, hopefully it's useful.
Thank you very much, Soushiant. That was quite uplifting, elevating, and inspiring to see, basically in a nutshell, what you've been working on for a number of years, and what you're trying to do in terms of a seismic shift, really, in the way we operate as a global community, or as a village community, or as a corporation, or as a hospital, or whatever you want to call it. So the instrument which you're enriching our democratic processes with is quite complex in some ways, but at the same time incredibly simple in how we can increase participation and agency for all individuals and stakeholders. So thank you for putting it so succinctly for all of us. At this point, I'd like to invite our panelists, so Ali Ansari and Afshin Molavi, to begin your discussions together, really, about this phenomena in particular, but more generally as well, in terms of the historical processes of gaining a better understanding of the concept of democracy, and the manner in which we may be able to perhaps create new models of participation as old ones fall apart. So over to you, Ali and Afshin and Soushiant together. Oh, Afshin can't speak, so. All right, so there we go.
Got it. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and can you hear me? I think you need to also release my video.
Yes.
Because I can't restart it.
Okay, thank you. Alijan, we have to start off now. I mean, this being an Iranian gather, we have to start off, you know, after you, please.
No, I mean, well, I'm going to offer it to you, and because until I can get my video started, Tarijan, you have to start my video.
All
but
right,
I'm happy to kick off if you start my video. But if you can't start my video,
you need to do it yourself. I don't have control over that. Sorry.
It says I can't, but never mind. Anyway, so you'll have to avoid seeing me, which is probably a good thing, actually. First of all, this was a fascinating talk, and I have to say I learned a lot. And Soushiant, of course, sort of was at a very, very generous introduction to begin with. But I have to say, while I think about things and occasionally write about things, at least you're doing something, which is a good deal more practical than me. I was particularly sort of fascinated with that aspect about data points, actually, and the way in which information is gathering pace in a way that we hadn't really predicted, and what this means for the way in which we interact socially and politically. I mean, I think, you know, for my you know, a couple of points that I'll make and then hand over to you, Afshin, and for discussion is really, you know, I think it's good for us to understand really how rare democratic settlements are in the world. You know, that these are sort of relatively late historical developments, that they are the products of quite long and often, you know, quite turbulent aspects of engagement between state and society. But, you know, taking away the romanticism of it as well, of course, there are also means by which the modern state can work a bit more efficiently because of transparency, accountability, and other things. And it's also interesting, I think we ought to, you know, recognize this, that the word democracy, of course, until the 20th century was largely viewed with a lot of suspicion, even by those countries that pursued sort of popular electoral politics, because democracy, as opposed to the republic, was seen as something that would be highly problematic. You didn't want democracy was seen as synonymous with populism, and, you know, as Soushiant said, we can see some of the consequences of populism today. So it's quite interesting to see how the idea has developed over the centuries, and how the idea has settled in, particularly in the Anglo-American world, of course, in France and Europe and other places, and what this has meant. But I think it's important for us really to understand just how distinct a development this is. It was never really the standard form of political organization, which has basically, you know, over the longer term in history, been some form of autocracy, and we ought to accept that and see that for what it is, and what what a special, in a sense, what a unique solution it is. I mean, in terms of people becoming complacent or people becoming dissatisfied, it's something that we need to pay a little bit more attention to. And also, I'll just sort of end my little spiel now with this notion that, of course, democracy as we understand it is more than simply the ability to vote. I mean, it's about a process of accountability, yes, but it's also about an idea about rights. And I think that's also particularly important. I think far too many people, particularly in the developing world, have often viewed it as engaging in the ballot box. And what we end up getting, of course, is the tyranny of the majority, which is no good at all. I mean, there's no point having just 51% dictating what the rest of us have to do. So that's another problem, which I think people don't fully comprehend, particularly when they're sort of acquiring these ideas. That what we have today, and I can discuss this a little bit further, afterwards, is really a form of liberal democracy. It's not direct democracy, although this is what, in a sense, we're talking about now. It's a form of liberal representative democracy, and I think these things are things we can discuss. But I think I've now talking way too much, and I will pass over to you, Afshin, for your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Ali John, and thank you also to Tahir John for organizing this seminar and just in general organizing these kind of conversations. And Soushiant, I congratulate you. It seems to me that you have struck on 2 points. I mean, I once heard one of these prominent figures from Silicon Valley say, when you're looking to start a business, you should look for friction points and try to solve those friction points. And it seems to me that you've touched on 2 friction points. One, which is quite practical, which is how do you have your voice heard in an organization, and how does that voice go to the top? And it seems to me that you've done a great job with that. But the second friction point might be even a psychological one. Which goes not only into the organizations and firms, but also on a broader political level, and it's you're helping people's voice be heard. And in many ways, the reason that's a psychological one, I say, is because you mentioned these Pew polls. It is quite striking when you look at some of these Pew polls to see how much anxiety there is in the world today, how much frustration there is in the world today. When you ask people, particularly even in Western advanced democracies, do you feel your country is moving in the right direction? The numbers are quite striking in terms of the answer to that being no. And one of the things that we've noted in economics, the economists are developing a heart these days, and people are looking at happiness metrics and happiness studies. And one of the things, when you get beyond some of the fluff of that, I think a lot of people have found that where you find happiness is in meaning, in purpose. And one of the ways to find meaning and purpose is to have your voice be heard. And I think that's the other friction point that you seem to be touching on. One of the things I do, and I spend a lot of my days thinking about is kind of some of the big macro trends that are shaping our world. And when I look at these big macro trends shaping our world, I look at things like rapid urbanization, right? This is a trend going from the year 1800 to today. It's one of those up and to the right charts that just seems to be moving up and to the right with very little variation. In the year 1800, we had a 3% urbanization rate. In the year 1900, it was 15%. Today, we're at 55% urbanized, headed for 2/3 urbanized by the year 2050, according to the UN. You add a layer of unprecedented connectivity to that, right? So we're living in a time of unprecedented connectivity. It took the telephone, here's a good example, it took the telephone 75 years to get to 50 million users. Angry Birds did that in 30 days, right? So we're living in a time of unprecedented connectivity. And we're also living in a time of growing middle classes. And one thing we know about growing middle classes is there are rising expectations. And it was Alexis de Tocqueville, I think, wrote very well about the French Revolution, which he said that revolutions do not take place when people are at their most miserable. They often take place amidst rising expectations that are unmet, right? Rising expectations unmet. And we're all across the world, we're seeing growing middle classes, rapidly urbanized, unprecedented connectivity. People can see behind walls now because of this unprecedented connectivity. And so we're living actually in a very interesting transitional moment, one that is full of promise, but also that can be quite dangerous in this transitional moment. I often refer to Antonio Gramsci, the great Italian writer who was writing in the 1920s of a different transitional moment. But I think what he said back then is relevant to today, where he said that the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot yet be born. And in the interregnum, the morbid symptoms appear. We're seeing some of those morbid symptoms playing out across the world, as you noted in your introductory remarks. And so I think anything that can give people a voice, that can contribute to their sense of meaning and sense of purpose, and that can also help ideas percolate to the top. Because one thing we know about innovation is that they certainly, innovation doesn't, happen at the top. It often does happen, down below. So I congratulate you on doing, what you are doing, and I wish you luck in the next steps as well. But I wanted to ask you a question about the next steps, and if you could kind of give us a sense of how this actually works, right? So if maybe at an organizational level. Let's say I have an idea and I want to share it at the top. Maybe you can give us a sense of how that works.
Yeah, perfect. This is a good segue back to the presentation. I'll show you guys a couple of slides of how it's implemented inside an organization, and maybe speak to how we see this scaling and what caveats we see as well. Let's go back to this. So the way it works inside an organization is, you like us, you like the concept, you're ready to do this. So we engage with one of the departments or C-level inside a company. And they would normally come onto the platform and set up a big question or a challenge or a mission that they want a number of creative ideas for. How might we reduce spoilage in the company, or what is the next, set of innovations that we need to invest in, or who might disrupt our business model in the next year? This invites a number of people across the company to input whatever ideas they have. But before they input their ideas, they come to our platform and they start to go through a question-answer process. That question-answer process gets turned into a document, and we use some AI to help them understand the flaws of their own writing. One of the largest problems in participatory processes is that those with the best writing skills often capture the attention of all the potential options that you get to select from. When you look at participatory budgeting experiments, this has been a constant trend where usually older white men and women who have more time on their hands and are higher skilled end up, capturing 70% of the voting budget of those processes. And those that may be facing problems on, they're down on the ground, but they can't really express themselves very strategically, they don't really have the same say. So we use AI to really help people see the biases of the writing, improve the language, give them a score, all this sort of stuff. Once they're comfortable and they're ready, they put the idea on the platform, and now the rest of the crowd can get involved in the idea. They can edit the idea like a Google Doc. They can debate the idea, rating the pros, the cons. They can add evidence, and they can vote on the idea. The collection of the engagements that people have on an idea become metrics. And so only if an idea hits a certain number of metrics does it actually escalate to a decision. It's not a popularity contest. It's more, we're looking to see how much the idea improved, how much engagement it received. That to us signals that this is worth consideration. Not necessarily this is ready to, make a $5 million decision on, but this has received enough attention from the organization that you need to think about this, you need to consider it. So that's what Sway digitizes. It's that whole process in a very kind of fluid and friendly UI and UX, walks people through this, and at the end of the process gives you a number of ideas that have been through the diligence and the collective intelligence of your organization. And you decide on the platform what to do with these ideas, whether you're going to accept them or reject them. But the goal is you have to tell people why you picked them or you rejected them, so that this trust that you've invested in, creating actually is maintained and reinforced. That's sort of how it works. I'll show you a couple screenshots of the process. Like when you enter an idea, this is sort of what the AI does. It makes some suggestions on evidence or reframing or language. It gives you some idea of the sentiment of your writing, how much bias there might be, or how sensitive certain words might be, so that you have a chance of sanitizing your writing before it's shown to other people. Other people get involved in 3 ways. They can edit, suggest edits to your writing. They can, as I said, debate the idea, pros, cons, neutral points, and they can vote in a non-binary way. They can vote the extent to which they agree or disagree with this idea. And at the end of this, like, this is the type of document that would be produced. Everyone sees the same thing too. If the idea has enough steam, you sort of see how much metrics it's achieved. You see the source of the substance, you see the debate, and you see how people have voted for it. So it's very, very ready for a decision. Yeah, that's sort of how it works. And I think the caveat I wanted to mention is, like, we don't see this replacing federal politics at all. In fact, it's probably the wrong place to take this. The right place to take this is at the municipal levels of politics, in your municipality, in potentially your city. As you said, urbanization rates are going the way they're going. We'll have 70% of global population living in cities. Cities will have larger budgets. Their issues are more local, less contentious, more pragmatic, practical, and the opportunity to demonstrate value out of a process like this is much higher inside a smaller environment than it is, having almost a Twitter debate about whether abortion should be legalized or not using sway at a federal level. It just won't work. So those are some really important caveats, is that while we hope stuff like this contributes to the replacement of politicians, the reality is it'll probably be a much more bottom-up, smaller impact initially that has normative impact on other areas that may need this.
I mean, if I can just come in there, actually, because this is fascinating again, and for me, where I can see this having a really important contribution as it stands is in the great bureaucratic institutions of the state, where precisely as you say, it's very hierarchical. It's quite difficult often to get ideas through from the bottom up, and often difficult to engage because it is precisely so hierarchical, and those at the top tier often make all the decisions. But of course, these bureaucratic institutions of the state have already vetted out in some ways, particular groups, because obviously to join, say, for the sake of argument, whatever ministry it is, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, whatever you want, you're dealing with some fairly highly educated people. So those educated people are already, in a sense, have been self-selected or selected. I would, probably be, would wonder, and I'm glad you sort of came in and say you don't see this as functioning at a federal, level, or even at a, say, a national level or whatever, because it would be, I think, very, very complicated to manage. And of course, this sort of element of direct democracy, how does that work in terms of, when we're looking at, for democracy to function in that level, you need a certain degree of educational ability. You need a certain also ability of willingness, I think, to participate. I mean, I think one of the great flaws we have today is that the absence of trust, which I think you quite rightly highlighted, is also, the burden is also on those who are meant to hold the political leaders accountable, and their ability to keep those people accountable and to be knowledgeable enough to do it. You know, I mean, this is the problem, that often they're not. You know, they're too willing often to accept things, or you know, they're just not sufficient. You know, I think one of the key points you brought out, which I'm going to have to talk to you offline about this, Soushiant, because I think it's a very
Sure.
important line, is this whole, you know, this is something that I always wrestle with. And you gave me some data, if you will, which was very helpful. That is that we have a surplus of information and an absence of knowledge. It's this great paradox of the modern world, you know, that we have so much data, but we actually know much less. I mean, in a curious sort of, because nobody reads. I mean, nobody reads anymore. You know, we used to read. Now people Google and they sort of pick out something, and you'll be lucky if they read a sentence or a paragraph, often out of context. Right. So this is the problem. And, you know, I wonder whether in terms of re-energizing, and this is a question for you, to be honest, re-energizing, we're not even talking about cities. I think cities are too big. You know, you're talking about 5-6 million people. I mean, it's just not going to work. What you're really looking at, and let's, I don't want to let Afshin quote de Tocqueville on his own. Let me go to Democracy in America, right? So Democracy in America, what does de Tocqueville say about US democracy is actually how organic and local it is. That it starts from that very, so, you know, he contrasts it with French democracy, which is very top down and very structured. But American democracy is based on the sort of almost like the parish and the church and the, you know, and then it builds different layers. And this is where I think you have I think you have an excellent tool, if I will, to sort of re-energize that very, very local level and then build it up. And I do wonder in my own mind, and I just throw this out as a question, and maybe others will be able to go, you know, to what what is the limit in terms of feasibility of something like this? What becomes too big for it to become manageable? For me, it's much lower than the federal level. You've gone to the federal level, which could be 300 million people. That's just not going to work. But, you know, I think even at an urban level, a major, you know, I can't imagine running London like this, for instance. Not at the moment. Not at the moment. I think we need more development and refinement. I mean, obviously, I'm giving you your life's work, Soushiant, for the next 30 years. You know, you have to do it. But anyway, it's just, I'm just throwing those ideas out to you. I mean, to see what you think. I mean, it is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, I think, to see how all this information has disempowered us, hasn't it? Is really what we're saying. Because we can't deal with it. We can't process it.
And Soushiant, maybe while you're processing that question, which is I think a very relevant one, and I look forward to your answer. Maybe I'll just add another layer to the mix. Is that not, you know, and you'll appreciate this, Ali. It's one of my favorite Winston Churchill remarks, where he said that, you know, a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can even put its pants on.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And this is I'm adding social media to the mix
absolutely.
here.
Absolutely.
Now, you know, one of the reasons it strikes me that we do find so many people frustrated with democracy in Western advanced economies is because I think they feel this political polarization that they're seeing, and so much of that is driven by social media. And you know, we all know the sort of things that go on social media. But even when things, even when nefarious things are not going on, i.e. bots and that sort of thing, it's not the ideal form of debate, you know, 140 characters, et cetera, you know, to Ali John's point about, you know, reading. So, you know, I wonder if you've thought about that, because, you know, we are living in this age of anxiety, as I noted, and the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated a lot of the existing inequalities that were in our systems, in our various systems. It exacerbated some of the anxieties. I mean, I think it's not just been a health pandemic, it's a mental health pandemic that we've been experienced with the COVID-19. And then you add this layer of this political polarization, which in many ways, I'm not asking Sway to solve that problem, Soushiant, but I just wanted to add that to the discussion as well.
there's a tall order of problems to solve, and you really can get extremely overwhelmed by where to start. Going kind of maybe starting with just observations and not even responses, really, Afshin. People have found misinformation spread 6 times faster than truth around the world. There's an excellent documentary that came out about 3-4 months ago that followed various narratives and did a very good expose of this. I'll find it and share it with Tahira John. She can share it as notes or whatever with people. But that is the time we live in, and it's that's not the root cause of why we have it. It's a symptom of the fact that people don't have a voice, is that we live in a time that we're looking for retribution. We call it retributive politics. For me, I didn't live through London at the time. I had just left London at the time, but the Leave vote was in many ways for me the fact that people live in such a stratified, hierarchical society with no voice for generations. And this was their chance to say a big F you to the system. Trump, in many ways, was that too for me. That is the reality we live in, the rise of authoritarianism and stuff. But on the flip side of that, one thing that inspired me from years ago was looking at the data of citizen assemblies. There are 3 major experiments done, the most kind of advanced experiments of putting the citizens into the decision-making process to actually create binding outcomes. One experiment was in the Netherlands, the other one was in British Columbia, and the other one was somewhere else. And both of those were focused on suggesting reforms to the electoral process. And they had specifically picked groups that had polarized ideological views to one another to be the assembly, to make up that assembly. And they did some benchmarking studies right at the beginning of those assemblies to understand levels of trust, perceptions of their reasoning from the other side, and a few other things. And as you can probably imagine, how might a Democrat and a Republican in today's world view each other? It was the same thing. Highly polarized, negative views skewed towards the other person's stupidity. Through the process of this deliberative stages of people bringing ideas to the table, having to debate the merits of that with other people, understanding give and take, consensus building, they built trust, and their perceptions of what people changed. At the end of the process, they ended up choosing one of these sets of policies over another, one that was disfavorable to that group. And when they did this post pilot benchmarking study, they realized that those that would be most negatively impacted were viewed these as the most legitimate decisions and ones that they supported, even though they disagreed with them, because they saw how they were made, because they were part of that process. Now, citizen assemblies are extremely inefficient. We can't do them given the times we live in. We're not going to find our next, consequential policies out of them. But what if we digitize a lot of those processes, digitize the reputation systems that come into them, use tools to help people accelerate through those stages? There's a lot we could do, and that really informed what I thought the potential of Sway could be, is through the process of deliberation, through the process of transparency, people have dignity again. They see what's real, and they reinvest and retrust the process. They reinvest and retrust other folks. I don't think we can get around it with simply using AI to filter out fake news from sources. The root cause is something else. The reason people are sharing fake news is because they feel silenced. You need to give them the ability to have a voice for that to go away.
And I'm glad you used the word dignity, Soushiant, because I've often felt that was, in some ways, just as powerful a D word in politics as democracy, right? And so I'm glad you added that to it. Thank you.
Ali John, observations about your point about scale. what are the limitations of the system? It's really not a numbers thing. It's more of a, what are the preconditions that this would amplify or support? The preconditions being people being, I think, quite digitally savvy or digitally engaged. People having a high ubiquity to internet connection, having other kinds of functions that they already use. I don't think age necessarily is a precondition. Like, we've done sway with, Médecins Sans Frontières, whose the average age of the folks that were on the decision-making process were like 55 and above. You can simplify this. It's mostly like, do they have the cultural preconditions to accept that other people are also going to be part of the decision-making process? And I do think London could be run by a version of this, at least some of the more important municipalities. You could have, geotagged maps that show problems inside the cities with potential solutions to those, create deliberation around those things. And to clarify one other thing, it's not a matter of like forcing an opinion onto the agenda. It's to create a pathway for opinions that aren't there. And in many ways, allowing the executive to justify why they accept or don't accept certain things. That's not in our process at all. That process in itself, I think, would dramatically improve trust in the people. Don't know why decisions are made. They don't have any way of understanding them either. And I think, starting at some of those scales could make some improvements too.
Are you saying, I mean, where I sort of understand you, or correct me if I'm wrong, is basically you're saying it could be useful even at a larger scale for particular projects. So if there's a particular thing that we're looking at, for instance, the Garden Bridge, for instance, or the, I don't know, various statues who might want to stay up or come down or whatever, I don't know whether that goes out. I mean, that I could see. And I think, that would be a fascinating idea.
I think
in order to engage people. Yeah.
Sway can, in like today's world, can replace the need for all surveys and all consultation processes. Like, starting today, you don't need to ask people their opinion of whether they like this or don't like this. Tell them to come up with solutions that are for this or against this. Like, tell them to come up with creative responses to what you're planning to do. Don't, limit their input to tacit acceptance or protest. Those aren't useful options anymore.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, actually. I mean, that is because the minute you encourage people to find solutions, of course, it becomes, first of all, they're much more invested in it. They have to be much more engaged with it. And it's not simply, as you say, as sort of a data point where you come and say, I don't like this or I like this, and then walk off and let other people try and find a solution.
So one, secret, or not even secret, just the thought experiment that we had early on when we were working on Sway was like, how do you, one, finance this and create the conditions for engagement for citizens? A lot of them are extremely utilitarian. They're like, you know what, who cares? Even if I put an idea, like, how is this binding? What will make the mayor or the elected official actually care about this? And when we were building Sway, it was during the time when, blockchain had its heyday and all these tokens were being launched and things like this. There were some thoughts of us doing our own token, or at least allowing tokens to be injected into integrated into the platform, that allowed people to tie some of their tax contributions to their voice on different issues. So, or, actually investing in putting some money on the platform themselves, saying, I'm for this idea, and, I'm putting $200 or $500 towards its implementation. Those things create not just normative pressure, but material pressure on things. Sorry, digression, but really, this is the world I live in. I'm in the future, and sometimes, a bit too idealistic, but I want to share one other global experiment with you, just as a thought piece for you to consider. A friend of mine started a really, really interesting experiment called A Good Country. Simon Anholt was one of the partners, but I think it was her baby. And it was the fact that 15% of the population of most countries has a consistent set of global values. They believe in anti-war. They want climate change to be prioritized. All the the lefty kind of things that I subscribe to in many ways as well. However, they're not strong enough to form any political majority. So the structures of representing their interests or putting their ideas on agenda aren't available for them. There's limitations to that. So they're like, well, the internet exists. Why don't we just create our own country called the Good Country? And anyone who subscribes to these values can become a citizen of this country. And it's not just, okay, I'm a citizen, haha, here you go. Everyone, every year who's a citizen has to make a financial contribution to the budget of this country. They estimated somewhere close to, initially, I think 150 million people would be their potential market size. They had a $5 a month or $5 a year subscription fee. It was like $1.6 billion in their Federal Reserve that they could use as bartering power to get certain things on the global agenda that just would never come about unless people protested or hunger striked or whatever else they need to do to reflect them. Alternatives, it may seem impractical, but we have to try, and we have to try to anchor it in today's world of not just ideas, not just blah blah, but create economic power as a result of this, so that people have a voice and those actions are created. That's the big picture with Sway. I hope we can get ourselves there.
Well, that is quite, sorry, Afshin John. This is quite exciting, and we've had about 6 or 7 different questions come in that I would like to share with everyone to get responses on. But before we do that, I think Afshin John wanted to say something.
No, I cede the floor to the questions. I'm very interested in hearing them.
One of the first questions that has come in is, what are the implications of Sway for judicial processes?
That's a very excellent question, and I would defer to a different startup than us. There's a company called Kleros, Kleros, initially called Crowd Jury, founded by one of our board members, a very, very close friend of mine, who wanted to replace Argentina's corrupt judicial system with a process of crowdsourced justice. And the way it works is people who have a specific case or specific grievance would bring their grievance to Crowd Jury, and their algorithm sources experts around the world that have expertise on that issue. Both parties write a memo about their case, and these experts come to some collective decision based on their individual judgment on that issue. And this process, replaces the need for some centralized and potentially corruptible intermediary in the middle that can make a decision that's not just. They launched this when we both came out of Singularity. They have processed over 2,000 cases now, and it's real. This guy did a PhD on collective intelligence before he built this. There's ways of making collective intelligence efficient and effective, and that's really the future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. The second question that we have received is there any evidence or any studies you have done on Sway that determines how using Sway could decrease inequalities in participation?
Excellent point. Yes, every implementation at this stage has been followed up with not a third-party study, but maybe potentially biased study on our side, looking at ways in which we increased morale, happiness, engagement, and retention inside organizations directly from the use of Sway, and the extent to which communities that didn't necessarily have a voice increased their participation in that process. In the UN, we had 2,000 proposals that came from 87 countries. This was never done before for a consultation of this kind of stature. And very soon we're building a diversity score into Sway. So every proposal that is on there, you can see how much gender diversity, geographic diversity, and functional diversity existed in the inputs of that idea. So it's a huge important thing. It's not just being woke and having pronouns, but we think diversity is the ultimate means for reducing bias and cognitive biases in particular. The more diverse the participants, the more likely you're going to catch biases early. And so it's a win-win for you to think of it that way too.
Fantastic. So I guess that actually answers another question we had received, which was, have you noticed any changes in the percentage of women participants in through processes that Sway has been tried on?
Listen, there's two groups of people that Sway disproportionately favors. One is those that are underrepresented, and the other is introverts. We have a thing called conditional anonymity, which allows anyone on the platform to write proposals anonymously. And the only condition is that if you are an asshole, you will be outed and you'll be kicked off the platform by site admin. The other condition is if your proposal actually makes it to a decision and is accepted because you've done such a great job, your identity is revealed. Okay. So that you can benefit from the reputational gains of this. So what we've noticed is it dramatically increases participation from those that normally wouldn't have the forward, attitude or whatever to raise their hand or stick their neck out for their ideas.
Okay, so that could obviously then impact women participants as well.
It absolutely can.
Okay, wonderful. And the next question that has come in is there any evidence showing that Sway actually increases trust among participants?
It's not empirical, and it has, like we do, the way we do our pilots is before people start, we send a survey asking them some baseline questions of what is their level of trust of the organization, of the decision-making processes, of their buy-in to the agenda and the sets of strategies they have. We also ask other questions about how often or how fluid is the collaboration processes between them and other colleagues. And then at the end of Sway, we ask these questions again, asking, did Sway have a material and direct impact on these types of questions? And in almost every case other than sometimes having a voice in decisions, because there's still some tensions and frictions to deal with, it does increase people's trust of the process and trust of one another, because they get to hear ideas that they normally wouldn't on Slack or Teams or other places.
Wonderful. Another question is focused on how does it improve the quality of consultation and collaboration?
So going back to the question or the point I raised is most consultations provide you a preset number of choices to provide your preference on. They don't allow you to build on top of those preset choices an alternative idea, right? So you may have higher participation in a consultation because the way you engage is through an ABC multiple choice survey, but the options in front of you may not be the best. Well, what Sway does is just allows anyone to, should we build a park here, or we're planning to build a park here. Do people have alternative ideas to this? It opens up the floor for very different ideas to be not only proposed, but developed through the community, so that they can have legitimacy and representation at the decision-making tables. So it increases optionality in most cases.
The second last question is, working in a global environmental organization. This is from direct from the participants here. I see many city officials from the global south are struggling to develop compelling investment-ready project proposals to apply for international funding, mainly due to the English language barrier. Could SWAY be helpful in these cases, and if so, how?
So I will provide my email address for follow-up afterwards, but I'll give you an anecdote from the UN example. English is not the official language of the UN. There's 6 official languages of the UN. And in order to ensure that 84 different people, 84 countries were represented in this process, we did an instant translation of all the content on the platform in 6 languages. And we did instant translation of our AI algorithms in those 6 languages. So if English is a difficult language for people to express themselves in, they could use Arabic, Chinese, Spanish, French, and Russian to express their ideas. And the platform helps translate those in effective ways and hopefully add some value through the AI processes. But that's often not the main problem. It's usually that the bar is maybe set too high, that people can't necessarily get to. The bar needs to be calibrated to people's level of understanding of the topic. Investment readiness is a very broad term. I think there's ways of decoupling that to allow people to reach that bar, which we also help with organizations, like crafting that question to really engage and create proposals out of it is a really important part of the process, and it shouldn't be done lightly.
Fantastic.
I think people should ask questions from the other panelists.
Well, this is all the questions that's come in. So the final one is actually, I think it relates to you sharing your email, because people have actually texted also saying they want to see if they could get your presentation, receive your presentation, which I just want to say that this video, of course, is broadcast live on Facebook and will be on Persia's Facebook page and our upcoming YouTube channel. So it's accessible and everyone is welcome to review it as many times as they'd like. The final question, of course, is we've got 3 different inquiries saying, how do people get involved with SWAY?
At the moment, it's still focused on providing a solution to companies, NGOs, organizations, or municipalities. If you are part of an organization that you think could benefit from SWAY, then definitely reach out and we'll walk you through the way in which you can present this to leadership. If you are a leader yourself and want your people to have access to SWAY, you want to hear ideas that are not being shared with you, then definitely get in touch, because we can share some case studies and other things to help you make the right choice.
Fantastic. That's all the questions that we have received at this point. I suppose we're ready for concluding remarks by all of you.
Thank you again, Tarijan, and Soushiant, you're giving a voice to many people, and so thank you for including my voice here. I just will summarize by saying that in this transitional moment that we're living in worldwide, the more we can give people a voice, but a meaningful voice, right? Because sometimes people say, oh, well, Twitter, now everybody has a voice, right? Or social media, now everybody has a voice, but but this seems to be a more meaningful voice that you're giving to people. So I congratulate you. I wish you well on your journey, and as the Liverpool Football Club anthem says, you will never walk alone. So you can any help I can provide, I'm happy to.
Lots of love.
Thank you.
And I mean, I'll just echo that. I have to say, I found it absolutely fascinating. And I'm just going to alert you now that I'm going to be in touch. I am going to be in touch because I want to pick your brains a bit more and also find out how, you know, we can use this to good effect and try and apply it in ways that I think would be quite interesting. So, you know, well done. I think that's it's fantastic. So yeah, as I said, just to warn you, I'm going to be in touch.
Much appreciated. And I don't have a lot to say. I think the thing I want to leave people with, other than, you know, enormous thanks to Tahir John for doing this, it relates back to
Yes.
the value of bringing all of us together to even potentially disagree with one another. We don't have enough of that in our diaspora, in our society. And if we hope for a better democracy and hopefully a better Iran, we need to invest more in doing constructive disagreement with one another. I hope Sway can play a role. I hope institutions and processes and initiatives like this can continue playing a role. And I really thank you for the thankless work you do. Afshin John, Ali John, thank you very much for investing your time in this and your reputations. It means a lot to me that you joined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In fact, on behalf of Persia, I should also add my appreciation to all three of our panelists who, despite demanding schedules and incredible workload at this eventful time that the world is really facing more than ever before in and around Iran, and here in the West, of course, with the pandemic and other challenges. You were kind enough and gracious enough to accept our invitation to join this panel and to bring such enthusiasm and energy to this exchange, which we feel at Persia is going to play a great role in the way we position the education of the future generation of citizens everywhere, so that we're actually able to be the protagonists of our own life and future. And with the necessary level of not just information, but insight and experience, we're able to create spaces in which progress is meaningful, not just rapid, and brings with it the kinds of positive changes that are necessary for the global community and the human family to go on in a sustainable manner. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to the participants and the viewers. And we will continue to support the work of Sway and advertise it in our upcoming social media posts, as well as any other information that our other two panelists would like to share with the community that is interested in education and the work of Persia. Please join us for our future webinar. It's going to be on 8th of September, and it's going to look at the impact of the internet in the world of fashion, which is a bit different than the topic that we're addressing today. Nevertheless, of a great deal of interest in terms of how we channel fashion, which is such a universal phenomenon in and of itself, from production to consumption, and the choices that we need to make in order to ensure that the world could go on in a more sustainable manner. If you're interested in also supporting Persia, please visit our website at www.persia.education and support our work and our scholarship schemes that are designed to assist Iranian students in the UK and beyond. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.